This is a Security Weekly production for security professionals by security professionals. Please visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to all the shows on our network.
It's the show where we explore the business of security to improve the security of business. Your trusted source for actionable insights on leadership, communication, and innovation. Get ready for Business Security Weekly. Imagine a world where every threat, ransomware, supply chain attacks, zero-day exploits is stopped before it can even begin. ThreatLocker makes that world a reality with a zero-trust approach to cybersecurity. By giving you granular control on every executable that can happen in your environment, ThreatLocker protects your business around the clock. No more guessing, no more gaps. Just rock-solid protection that keeps your operations running smoothly and your data secure. Discover how ThreatLocker's least privilege approach can safeguard your organization against known and unknown threats. Take the first step towards total peace of mind. Visit securityweekly.com/ThreatLocker today.
Hello and welcome to episode 400 of Business Security Weekly. I am Mandy Logan and I am thrilled to be here attempting to fill the seat of Matt Alderman while he is very excitingly getting to prep for his amazing daughter's wedding. I am thrilled for him and I'm glad that we get to have an interesting discussion today. So I am joined today by Peter Hedman, correct?
Hedberg, yeah.
Hedberg of Corvus by Travelers. And we're going to discuss some things around CISO empowerment for cyber insurance. Now, this is a subject that I feel like I cannot wrap my entire mind around the actual ins and outs of cyber insurance and how it applies, what gets used, how it's adjusted. So I'm excited for this discussion. And I am joined today by Craze Fowler. Summer, how are you?
Well, nice to see you, Mandy. Excited to be here. And hey, not that I don't think insurance is exciting, but it doesn't, and when you first think of it, you're like, oh man, insurance. And then you dive into the world and it is fascinating. So I'm super excited to have you here today, Peter.
Excellent.
You can tell my kids how amazing insurance is.
You're like underwriting. It's basically the whole best sport in the world. And Mr. Ben Carr, how are you?
Hey, Mandy, great to be here. Yeah, I told my kids today I'd be talking about actuarial tables, and they were like, amazing, Dad, can we get in on that? And I said, nope, it's Dad only today. It's all I get to have all the fun. So
you locked the office door to keep them out, right, yeah. Ben?
I know, they're beating, they want to get in right now. Like, they can't wait to talk about, risk and percentages. And
you need to add to their chore list. They've got to earn the right to get into this. Oh, my goodness. Well, Peter, so first, who are you and what is your role? How do you influence, whether that's at Corvus or within cybersecurity? Please acquaint us with your situation in here.
So thank you for having me again, guys. My 9-to-5 role is I'm an underwriter. I'm on the senior leadership team for Corvus by Travelers. Corvus was an insurtech, got started about 6-7 years ago. And we incorporate a lot of technology into our underwriting for our cyber product. Cyber's kind of new to the insurance space. That's obviously why we're having this discussion today. Travelers, which is a very big, large institutional carrier, saw what we were doing and decided that they wanted to incorporate that into the portfolio of how they handle this particular insurance product. So happy that we proved some value there and happy to talk about the journey that we had there. So that's what I do for them. Part of my job as an underwriter is I get these get data sets and applications from my independent brokers. Okay. I evaluate the risk. I turn around and I will quote business that I like, that I find desirable. That's based on a number of factors. If they like my quote, they decide to go with me for the insurance. So it's my job. As far as my non-9-to-5 stuff, I do a lot of advocacy work through panel discussions, whether that be conferences. I was recently at RSAC, and then also appearing in interviews, press, stuff like that. I'm really just trying to carry the message about CISO empowerment and the role they can play in the insurance purchasing. So that's what I do.
Oh, excellent. Now, I'm curious, what is one main factor that makes you look at a scenario with a company and go, yes, I absolutely want to work with them?
So a lot of it has to do with how they're treating their CISO, and I can see that in how my applications are filled out.
Oh, okay.
So oftentimes I can detect who's actually filling the application out. So a lot of times in the finance function, which typically handled insurance for many decades, they'll check things, like a CFO would check things and yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. But then sometimes I'll get applications where it's like, yes, don't know, don't know, don't know, don't know, don't know. And it's because all of these questions should probably get completed by a CISO or an IT director or somebody in that role. And so to me, when I start to see little notes in the margins that say, well, yes, but your question actually wasn't asked correctly because we have this, this, and this, and there's a nuance here. I can tell
Right.
that somebody took the time to go through that and actually answer those questions. And to me, that's an individual that's probably been empowered within their organization and created a security culture.
It sounds like you have a secondary data set that you could really get out to like HR folks,
Yeah.
and give revealing information on treatment of CISOs, or at least how it's handled in this space. That's cool.
Well, and it's funny because it to me, I like I like I like quoting business where the lightning has already struck. I know that sounds weird in the world of
Okay.
insurance, but when organizations have undergone a ransomware event or even like a fraudulent funds transfer, there's so many people within the organization that are pointing fingers at each other. And all of a sudden people realize that this is something you need to be responsible for. And that this CISO who has been demanding additional funds and more budget and is trying to buy new software to get more secure is not just an annoyance, it's actually a duty to the protection and the existence of this company. And so after that claims process, the way I evaluate these companies, the way they present themselves is just much different. It's much more sober. It's much more realistic. It's much more rational. It's much more based in, okay, we thought we were invincible. We got hit. Now we're going to treat ourselves like we're not invincible anymore. And so I see that come through in my underwriting. And sometimes I'll see the best organizations to insure because they kind of got religion out of that.
Do you surface
episode.
that? I'm wondering how you surface the visibility of that, like either inside of a quoting process or afterwards. Are you transparent about that? Because that seems like that advocacy that it actually matters would be important, especially if it actually does affect premiums and renewals.
It does affect premiums, especially with what they have implemented after that claim. So we have a scan that we use, so we can do an external scan. We're not doing internal scanning right now. That's a whole new frontier in underwriting. It's a different podcast episode. But the external scan will tell me things like open RDP ports, whether or not they've patched certain servers, whether or not they're using secure email gateway. A lot of these different control functions I can actually see from the outside. So that renders a score for me that then actually applies to the premium. And then I have some discretion based on what I'm seeing as an underwriter on those applications, whether or not I want to apply additional premium or reduce the premium based on that risk. So I, as an underwriter, see those things on the application, and that inclines me to give a better price because in a lot of ways, I want good business. Good business is going to mean more profitable business. And the way that I do that is through premiums in a lot of ways. So yes, I see it, I recognize it, and I reward it where I can. There are a lot of instances, unfortunately, where somebody has a really bad ransomware episode and they say, oh, well, that's why I buy insurance. And then they make no changes afterward. That probably is one of the worst customers you could have in the business. And there may be other markets that quote that, but I'm going to see that and I'm going to say, okay, they didn't get the religion. They didn't get the point. And I'm not going to quote that. So maybe I decline that business. And so that sort of sends a message back as well, too.
So I'm curious. Now, I understand Corvus has been around, what you said, 6 or 7 years, but you were in the cyber insurance space prior to that. So from 10 to 12 years ago to modern day, what are some of the main changes you have seen and what makes you excited about recent changes you see?
Yeah, so this is an insurance product. I don't want to hurt my future job prospects if anything happens to cyber, but I don't see myself handling workers' compensation or auto liability or property insurance and underwriting hurricanes and stuff like that, partially because the casualty and the actuarial tables are fairly stable. We see some predictable event periods there. Cyber, I have an antagonist who's causing claims that's always evolving. And so it's always changing. And so if you had talked to me 10 years ago, this entire discussion would have been about PCI, how many credit cards you're holding, or PHI, how much data you have. And I would get granular about that, right? I would talk about how many millions of health records maybe you have or something like that. And I would underwrite to that. Ransomware has changed the calculus on all of that. We used to think that law firms were a great piece of business because they had large amounts of unstructured data. It was probably hard to hold them ransom. Who knows what kind of PII levels they had. Now we find out that they're a great target. Why? Because they have a legal duty of confidentiality that's been established in court. And so they become this very effective target because whether the data was exfiltrated or held or encrypted or not, they're going to pay for suppression keys because for, just at a legal, but also at a reputational level, they want to make sure that they're safe and secure in that way. And so that evolution in all these different industries is just fascinating to me. So yes, little less emphasis on the types of data, more emphasis on the sensitivity of the data, the seasonality of that data. Manufacturing is a great example. We used to think manufacturing wasn't a great target because, again, low PII. Turns out they have a huge time sensitivity risk, right?
Yeah.
If you interrupt a manufacturing flow, right, with a ransomware attack, whether the software is actually on the devices or just at an operational level, well, you can extract a pretty decent ransom payment out of them at that point because they need to get making widgets again, right?
Right.
So there's just been there's never been a moment where I'm like, okay, we got a handle on this. Property gets to be like, I know what a category 4 hurricane hitting Miami is going to do. I know what that's going to look like. Every year, I don't necessarily know what my adversaries are going to do in this.
Peter, I have a question about how I know that the secret sauce behind underwriting is the IP that you have in your calculations and your tables. But one thing that I've always found interesting is CISOs are working within their companies and they're trying to assess risk. And you, on the cyber insurance side, are trying to assess risk of that company as well. What's the same or different about what you're doing versus what a CISO is doing? And how do you think like the two communities can help each other?
It's a great question. So I say this every year at RSA, and I get a few muddles, but I think it's true. Unfortunately, CISOs are the goalies of this sport. They will never be credited with winning the game. Every day they go without an operational interruption is a win. They're not treated that way, though. They will be credited with losing the game. So that is the challenge that they face. And so the difference between me and them is my job isn't necessarily on the line. If I poorly select risk, we have to just make adjustments in what we do and how we underwrite. When they poorly select, it could mean the end of their company. So the pressures are vastly different. But what I can do is offer them a lot of tools based on the experience that I see. So a CISO in their history may only see 1 or 2 ransomware events at a first party level. I see thousands every single year. The thousands of events that I see inform patterns that I see with these threat actors. I see vulnerabilities with particular pieces of software, whether it be, say, like a VPN provider. I can then turn that data over to the CISO community and say, hey, you guys are using a VPN that we have found is getting a lot more claims activity. We suggest you patch it, use a different one possibly, that sort of thing. So to me is where you start to see traction between our two groups and I can provide this data on a daily basis to them based on what I'm seeing in the marketplace. So for me, I absolutely hate this word. I'm not going to say synergy. I just said it out loud. But there is a complementary function there that we're starting to see. Does that make sense?
Symbiosis. We got to find it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to send you my asset inventory now and have you write back to me and say, fix this.
Yeah, and it's
Right.
funny because sometimes we contact the software provider where we have identified this pattern of vulnerability. And unfortunately, a lot of times the software provider says, we're amazing, don't talk to us again. And so we still meet some resistance from that side of the community as well, too, even though we're seeing this, pattern of vulnerability.
That is incredibly exciting. I mean, to see that you actually have your finger on the pulse of what is happening across multiple industries. I could see why you would be, yeah, I will stay in this part of insurance as long as possible, because getting to know you're providing real and actionable good to your clients, you are getting to help the CISOs be empowered. And aside from that data, like, your example of saying, hey, this VPN keeps having, it's consistent with a lot more issues. What is something else you found surprising from your work with CISOs that has allowed greater empowerment?
For me, attending RSA and hearing the pressures that they're under has really changed how I sell this product. The fact that they are burdened with constant criticism about cost, right? Because IT doesn't make money. I get that. It's a cost center, right? And every year there are new threats that need to be addressed. And so to have to hear them say, look, I know what you're asking for on an underwriting level. I can't get my boss to give me the money for this right now, right? To have that feedback come back to me, I can then respond with, okay, here's 7 claims examples of why what you're not doing might lead to something. And that then gives them the ammunition I think that they need. I think the other part of it too is they will sometimes tell me. So we freaked out over Log4j a few years ago, if you remember that. It's a vulnerability in a library within JavaScript. Everybody uses Java at some level or another, right? So we panicked, right? The insurance community was like bracing ourselves. It ended up not manifesting into anything super material. I think there were probably certain claims or whatever. And the funny part is the CISO community said that to us. They're like, guys, it's not that big of a deal. It's not that big of a deal. And we're like, yeah, but it's everywhere. And they're like, just at an operational level, I'm telling you, it's not that big of a deal. And so it has been really beneficial to have that bilateral form of communication. Also, the fact that a CISO gets to say, hey, I spoke to the underwriter. We get better rates when we do this. That all of a sudden, a boardroom starts to you start to see the sparks go off, and they're like,
Right.
"Oh, okay. Oh, we're going to save money." You know what I mean? So we give them the finance language. Go ahead. Sorry.
So talk to that a bit more. Like, so I'm interested, sitting in a CISO seat, I think a lot of CISOs would think there's no incentive for the insurer to give me tips to reduce my premiums, right? My coverage, because, you guys want to make more money, but there's another side to that of like, you guys have less losses, right? Like if there's better controls. So how can that interplay work? Because I think most people think of it, adversarial might be too strong, but it's not this person can help me. It's more of like, I don't know how much I really want to share. How open kimono do I get? What's the benefit of that? Having that a good relationship with your insurer can offer.
So a great relationship with an insurer looks like this. You decide to go with a particular insurance company, right? You've evaluated what they're offering, all the free services that they may have. But then after you bind that piece of business, which means, you buy the coverage from them, you actually use their hotline and you get in touch with their claims folks and you say, I don't have a claim, but I want to know who you guys use for vendors. I want to know what your response timelines are. I want to know what number to call. I want to build all of this into my incident response plan, because let me tell you one of the biggest pitfalls that we have in this type of insurance right now, and unfortunately where the whole criticism of the insurance never pays anyway kind of comes from is people see an event, okay? They panic. And instead of picking up the phone and calling their insurer, the first thing they do is they go and call all their other vendors that they may have on retainer. Those vendors may not be on panel with that insurance company, right? We deal with our vendors partially because a lot of the vendors you may have on retainer right now may not deal with security incidents very often. They're usually just there to consult with you. I deal with vendors who are handling thousands of incidents every single year. So they are just a little bit better equipped and they're a little bit faster and they're a lot less expensive. I've seen schedules of work get offered to insureds that are $30,000, $40,000, $50,000, and I got the work done for $8,000. And it was the same quality, it was the exact same work. And it was just because it was coming from a vendor who was far more versed in this. So to that effect, if you're a CISO, one of the best things you can do is integrate the insurer's vendors into your incident response plan so that it's seamless and you don't incur what we call pretender costs, which are all these other bills from these vendors. And then you get into this whole issue because the insurance carrier often doesn't want to cover those, right? Because the contract does mandate that you get in touch with us when a claim is happening. So that's a big thing is get that relationship going, learn names, get comfortable with who the people are, and then build it in as a mechanism. Because, and this second point to that, do the tabletop. I know it sounds annoying and time consuming, but every single tabletop that I've participated in, when you model out an incident, one of the most amazing things I hear around the table is, oh, I didn't think of that. Oh, I didn't think of that. Oh, wait, we need to bring this person in. Oh, I mean, when you literally go through the dress rehearsal of a breach or a ransomware event or something, there's so many things you're not thinking of. So just even go into the playroom and pretend, just go through it. You'll be shocked. So those are to me, those are some big things that you can really do to cinch that relationship between the security and the insurance provider and to make it absolutely seamless. I just had a claim with a multi-billion-dollar organization. We had gotten on the phone with them at the beginning of the policy period. What easily could have become a $100 million business interruption loss, we were able to settle for under $1.5 million.
Wow.
And it really speaks to everybody was on point, doing what they were supposed to do. The dress rehearsal had already been in place. People knew what to do. Nobody said, "What do I do?" Nobody had that moment.
Yeah. I think that's really important is to have those discussions up front. And to your point, I mean, if you don't like who's on the insurer's panel, like ask them. Like I've been able to get other vendors included, but I've had that discussion up front, let them look at them and say, oh yeah, they're fine. Like they're not in there, but we're happy to, pre-approve them. And then when you do have that incident, you already know who you're using, and it shortens the time cycle too, right? You're not struggling to figure out who you're going to use in that window because you've already identified it. The insurer's good with it. Everybody's on the same page.
Well, and as you know, a lot of times these bad actors, they put time bombs on these ransoms, right? Yeah. If you don't respond in a certain time, it ratchets up. And so that also eliminates that risk as well.
Yeah. I love this whole discussion around the exercise and practicing.
Right.
Peter, if you could wave your cybersecurity magic wand, if you could only solve one challenge, is that the one you would solve, or what would you solve if you could?
It's a great question. Honestly, that's number two. You know what number one is? Honestly, for me, the CISO should be in the boardroom, and their duties should be treated just as seriously as anybody who's handling any major financial function, the CEO, or all those major decision makers. Because I don't think people realize that cyber can create an existential threat for organizations. It shuts businesses down. It does. And so for me to have a board go, you know what, CISO, you are literally equal to CFO or any of these other chairs, and I'm going to endow you with those responsibilities. That to me is paramount right now. So I think the challenge I have is CISO is still this abstraction to the C-suite because it's so new. It's, kind of a new sexy term that gets thrown around, but they're not sure what it actually does. It's this unique role that blends both general counsel from this privacy standpoint and IT director from this technical standpoint. It's just this very special role. And I don't think boardrooms quite understand that yet. So for me, that would be number one. And then number two, get everybody to sit down at the table and pretend like something really bad just happened.
I feel like you need to have like an entire series in the Wall Street Journal so that people can read the things you have to say.
They probably wouldn't, unfortunately, but
From your lips to the board's ears.
Absolutely.
That's right.
But I do.
Yeah, we've been preaching this for a long time on the show. It's a constant theme we have. It's just, we were really disappointed in the SEC not, keeping that mandate to talk about what the board's experience was with cyber and having cyber leadership there. And so, it's constant refrain, get the board interested in cyber at some level and realize that it's not a necessary evil. It's a critical importance.
Yeah. And I just, again, I go back to this methodology or this analogy that I use often with people, which is if you've sprinklered your building and you've fireproofed it and you've done everything you can, do you stop buying property insurance? No, you buy it for that event. So every time I hear a board say, well, we've got incredible security and our CISO does a great job and we don't need this type of insurance. Again, a ransom event doesn't mean you have a bad CISO. A ransom event means something happened that you were not anticipating, a new evolution in the threat actor. And that's why insurance exists. And so, again, to my point, it's a much more important role that I think, unfortunately, it's given credit for.
Yep.
Absolutely. I have a couple of kind of rapid fire questions. So I have one that just yes or no. Do you feel that the questionnaire model is the best route right now for establishing cyber insurance?
Yes.
Okay.
I have more to say. Can I say more?
Well, I don't know. Should we let him say more? Do you think we should, or should we have the listeners that
If he writes it in the margins, like
in the margin, like a true CISO, like an established expert here? Okay, what is your margin note?
My margin note is, in a theoretical world, we would have behind the firewall scanning where we could do asset inventories and all that stuff. I have proposed this to the CISO community a few times, and we have a couple of inhibitions about it. The first one is, I'm not sure I want that data. I'm not sure I want that on my servers, right? Because that's a roadmap. It's a roadmap for people to do real bad things if they wanted to. The other side of that is, when it comes to accidental application misrepresentation, it's great because you get a very clear-cut view of what somebody's infrastructure looks like in that very moment. And so what you're rating off of is exactly right. You don't have any sort of dissonance between what is actually, like, everybody says, do you have MFA for email? Yes. Well, do you though? Maybe you've got a few accounts where you don't have it applied right now, right? Maybe the CEO says, oh, it's too difficult. I don't want to do it. And so you let the CEO not use MFA or something like that.
Yeah, Peter, that's the problem. Like I spoke at an insurance conference and somebody came up to me afterward and said, like, why are we still doing a bad job? And that was exactly what I pointed out. Like the questionnaires that you ask the wrong questions. You ask, do you have MFA? And the answer is like for everybody is, yeah, we have MFA. We have one system with MFA on it and the other 40,000 people don't. Like, yes, we have MFA. You're not asking like, what's the completeness? Is it like, how many factors do you use? Do you use impossible travel? Like we don't ask the detail to get there. And I'm interested that you still think the questionnaire model is good. I would rather see the continuous monitoring. I agree. I don't want to give you like the detail, but I would be happy to share the aggregate data, right? I'd be happy to share like, here's how quickly we patch, right? Or here's, a perspective on how good or bad we're doing at an aggregate level, but not the detail level. Like, I don't think you need the minutia. And I want the same thing for third-party risk, right? Like, I want to share this data across the board because that's the only way we get to actually understanding the problem set for both insurers and third-party risks. So, yeah, I think you're on the right point there. But I disagree with the questionnaire being the best because it's really poor questionnaires.
Is it the best we have right now? Yeah, maybe, just because of the circumstances. But again, this is my whole reason for a caveat is there probably is a better way. We will discover it along the way here.
Okay.
It was a
Okay.
big
Sorry,
margin,
Mandy, we blew up your yes
It
or
is
no.
a big margin. And I'm like, okay. But all I took from that is he's not setting on some like massive, intelligent way for it to be automatically adjusted and keeping it from us. So that's good news that he isn't holding that back. My next, like more rapid fire is what percentage of companies what is the percentage that you think of immediately as present day, this many companies that are ransomed pay?
I have data on this. It's a few years old, but it's probably 1 in 4.
Oh, interesting. Okay, because my more recent research keeps showing between like 60 to 78% are actually paying ransom. And when I'm speaking with those who do ransomware negotiations, that's what they're kind of trending toward that as well.
Yeah, and I think what a lot of that has to do with is maybe how the data is being segmented, right? So my data is coming from my breach counsel, who
Right.
they aggregate a lot of data, and so they say, hey, look, 1 out of 4 times that it's demanded. Now, you might be referencing data that is uninsured data too, right? Because there's still a lot of people that
Exactly.
don't purchase
Right.
this, right? And if you don't have cyber insurance and you don't have that crack team of people that are available to negotiate a ransom or to get you out of it, you're probably going to pay more often. So I would guess that's the discrepancy.
Okay. Fair. Completely fair. So, well, our time is come to a close, and I am sad because I do have more questions, but for our listeners, what is the easiest way for them to get in touch with you? Because it sounds like for the entire team and for the CISO that even going through the insurance buying process would be beneficial to them.
Yeah, absolutely. So my recommendation is, since I technically work through agents and brokers, get in touch with your insurance agent that you're working with right now. If you are not happy with the answers you're getting from cyber, see if they have an actual person that handles that on a daily basis. So
Okay.
sometimes insurance agents they handle a lot of different types of business, so they don't know about one specific one. So find that individual within the organization. I can be reached through LinkedIn, though. I'm happy to give some guidance and let people know. And you should find me pretty easily on there. So,
Peter Hedberg and Corvus.
yep.
This has been
Excellent.
fun. See, insurance is fun.
It is fun. I think it's fantastic. I don't know. Actuary
Great.
always sounded wonderful to me. So, to everyone, thank you so much for joining us, Peter. And please stick around. We have 2 pre-recorded interviews from RSAC conference with Stephan Jou from OpenText and Morey Haber from BeyondTrust that I'm sure will provide a lot of insights and delight you. So stick around, and thank you, Summer, Ben, and Peter. Welcome to RSAC Conference 2025. We're here recording live from the Cyber Risk TV studio in Broadcast Alley at Moscone West. I'm your host, Mandy Logan, and joining me for this interview is Morey Haber, Chief of Security Advisor at BeyondTrust. Welcome, Morey.
Mandy, thank you so much for having me.
I am so glad you are here. And now, in doing some prep for our interview, there was something on your resume that really jumped out at me.
Okay.
Okay, so can you tell me about your time working with the company that created flight simulators?
I can. So after I graduated college, I became a reliability engineer. And that is an engineer that tests to make sure something stays reliable, that its MTTR and its MTBF fall within certain parameters. That's the mean time to repair, the mean time to fix. So when you're building a flight simulator or a training simulator, you have to say, look, it'll last 3-4 weeks before you'll have to go in and change a light bulb, or a bolt will break, or the software needs to be rebooted. So in building those systems for C-17 aircraft, Abrams A-1A tanks, I was the reliability engineer assigned to empirically verify that those metrics could be done. So playing with engines, fake engines, like here's how you change the oil, or sitting in a tank simulator, shooting fictitious enemies was a part of the job. And it was a really fun job in the early 1990s because everything was done via video disc. It wasn't
Right.
computer AI generated. It was a different world. But yeah, that's part of my background.
That's fascinating. And is that, to me, it also seems like that would allow the people inside to have consistent efforts towards stamina. Was that another part of it on the human aspect, or did you just mostly stay on the technical side?
It was on the technical side. So one of the aspects of it is when a serviceman would come in and their mission was to do maintenance, proving that they could learn maintenance on a simulator before the actual device.
Okay.
And that simulator was accurate enough so that when they went to the real device, it worked. How I got into cybersecurity after that is all of the failure rates, all the data from the real systems and the simulators needed to be correlated. And I knew how to program. So I actually wrote a software database to bring all that information, including security information. And then my security career started after that, just naturally evolving. With Microsoft Windows, doing network management, because not all networks basically broke due to misconfigurations. A lot of them in the early 2000s were cyber attacks. And I just naturally evolved into cybersecurity, and here we are today.
So are you a large proponent for emulators being used or emulation being used in training for cybersecurity?
I believe a lot in simulation before real testing,
Okay.
Especially for organizations trying to simulate an outage or anything else, because when you do things on live systems, you can sometimes have repercussions that would be far more reaching, like leaving a system open to a future attack or something else. I always believe in training and emulation first before someone hits a real system.
Makes sense. I mean, we think in life all day, every day, I would rather have kind of a trial run.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Look, you're going to paint a wall. You put a couple of colors of paint on the wall before you do the whole wall to figure out if it's the right color. The same is true with, red teaming and pen testing. You teach in a simulation environment before you go to the full systems.
Excellent. So switching gears a little bit, I
Sure.
want to discuss BeyondTrust's Microsoft Vulnerability Report.
Okay.
And I understand this is the 12th year that BeyondTrust has done this. Have you been involved all 12 years?
I have been involved for at least the last 7.
7? Okay.
Maybe a little bit longer, but it takes a little bit of a story to explain. In 2018, Baumgar acquired BeyondTrust, Lieberman, and Avecto. This is just a history lesson in itself. The original Microsoft Vulnerability Report came from the Avecto product line.
Okay.
I came from BeyondTrust, and I've been with the company for 21 years now, which is a little bit of a unicorn in the industry. That report basically carried through the acquisitions. And what it does is it looks like every year's Microsoft vulnerability releases, their patch releases, and performs an analysis of how many are critical, how many are medium, how many low, but what were the underlying effects? Was this patch a bad patch where it caused outages or had some ill effects on systems? Did it have privileged escalation vulnerabilities that it was solving for? Did it allow for other types of attack vectors to occur? Really a detailed analysis of everything about them. In the 2024 report that was just released, we found that 40% of the vulnerabilities Microsoft patched basically allowed privileged escalation. That means that you could be a standard user and use that exploit to gain admin privileges. That's a staggering number considering the amount of identity-based attacks today. The Verizon data breach report, which came out about 2 weeks ago, cited that 80% of all attacks have an identity component. So if you look at that, those two statistics merged together, we really find that most of the attacks occurring today are due to some identity attack vectors. Yes, we still have vulnerabilities and exploits and software flaws. We still need to discover vulnerability management and patch, but social engineering and credential theft are really on the rise, and that's the biggest worry for people today.
It absolutely is. Now, when you're talking about escalation of privilege, in your mindset, having done this now for the 7 years that you've been involved, and my understanding is that the overall downward trend in critical vulnerabilities is being seen.
Correct.
But can you give like a correlation or a numbers on the escalation of privilege vulnerabilities or attacks that are being done and how it relates to the overall critical vulnerabilities?
I can. So critical vulnerabilities are vulnerabilities that would basically have a CVS score of 9 or higher by normal trade. So what we're thinking about here is something that is wormable and exploitable and immediately gives you admin rights. While coding has gotten better, AI has gotten better, code reviews, training, etc., has decreased the number of critical vulnerabilities. What we find in the industry is that some of the mediums and lows, if exploited even through social engineering attacks, allow the threat actor to basically gain admin rights. And that's key. It means you still have to patch everything, but most people go, got to get that critical done right now. We'll get to that medium in 30, 60, 90 days, and it could still lead to admin rights. And that's the key message that people need to think about.
Well, but the sheer volume of medium or low, like there's so many more. Am I correct in believing in the 2024 report there was about 40 critical vulnerabilities?
I don't remember the exact statistic, but there were well over 240 something total for the year. But when you consider 40% of that did have privilege escalation, you're over 100 of them that could have been leveraged to get local admin rights.
So I am curious with this. Are you talking about just CISA-KEV? Are you talking about the known exploited vulnerabilities?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I am.
So what about the vulnerabilities? Like just because they have not been exploited doesn't mean they aren't critical.
Well, that's key. So many times the proof of concepts are hard to implement, or there is no working exploits, but they've been deemed critical. Teams have not figured out, or no one has put the effort, or it's too complex to figure out how to actually exploit, and it becomes theoretical only. You can't gamble on that when you know the severity and you know the patch exists. You have to treat all of them as if an exploit's available. Otherwise, you potentially could be that next victim of, yeah, there is a working exploit. Someone else developed it, and it's now being used on a regular basis. Unfortunately, that happens quite a bit of, you know what, there's no working exploit. I think I have a little time. It's just a matter of time for a lot of them until that occurs.
So with that and the other key findings, what information would you give to a CISO or to a security team in using this information effectively?
So there's two pieces. One emphasizes what we've all known for years. You have to do vulnerability management. You have to do patch management. But more importantly, you have to do good identity security hygiene. You have to make sure that there are no leftover accounts that can be used for privileged escalation. For example, if you have local administrative rights, if you have dormant accounts on systems or shadow IT accounts, those need to be managed properly as a part of your joiner, mover, leaver process. Then you also have to understand the identity security hygiene of those accounts that could be leveraged from these vulnerabilities. This is where it gets a little nuanced. If you think about a certification report for IGA, it's that snapshot of time of this is the account, this is where the person has access, etc. But it doesn't tell you what's called paths to privilege. I have an account, it has an identity owner, but if I do this, this, and this, I actually could gain admin, even without the vulnerability and exploit. So BeyondTrust has a solution called Identity Security Insights that's designed specifically to do that. It takes the understanding of an identity and account and gives you a visual map of how it could be exploited and what the user's true privileges are, what they really could do in an environment. It complements the Microsoft Vulnerability Report because it shows you what identities could be abused locally, natively, even without an exploit, and if an exploit actually occurred. So if I know that this user now is compromised, the paths to privilege in the solution shows you how far they can actually get in terms of a hack in your environment. And that's key. Here at RSA, we announced this week that we have a free assessment of that tool. So any user can sign up on our website, BeyondTrust.com, enter their information. They'll get a call within about 15 minutes within business hours. And it takes about 2 hours to set up. And it'll give you that health report of here are your accounts that are at risk. Here's ones that may be dormant or have never had their passwords changed or administrative access that are shared to help you understand that, look, a low-level vulnerability escalated to this user could then compromise your entire environment. And we're doing this as a free assessment for anybody that asks, something to give back to the community, which nowadays, there's not many people that are willing to do that.
True. I mean, I think there's a lot of individuals who are interested in the greater good, or they wouldn't stay in security roles, especially in the government.
Correct.
But with BeyondTrust's offering, is it useful for non-Microsoft environments?
It is. So the way the offering works is it connects to your IDPs, Entra ID, Okta, Ping. If you're a BeyondTrust customer, it connects to our products as well, and then it provides that report. It is independent of Microsoft because it's identity-based. The results complement the report we've been speaking about because it shows you how an exploit could actually be used throughout an entire environment. If you try to think about it in a different perspective, how do you do vulnerability management for identities? And BeyondTrust has figured out how to do that. And that's our offering and now available as a free risk assessment.
I am so glad that that is available, and I'm glad for our audience that they're able to take advantage of that.
Happy.
So thank you so much for joining us, Morey.
You're very welcome and a pleasure being here today.
Excellent. To find out more about BeyondTrust, please visit securityweekly.com/BeyondTrust RSAC. For all RSAC 2025 coverage by Cyber Risk Alliance, please visit securityweekly.com/RSAC. Thank you again, Morey.
Thank you very much for having me.
Stick around. We'll be back after the break with more interviews live from the RSAC Conference 2025.
All right, we are back at the RSAC Conference 2025. We're recording live from the Cyber Risk TV studio and broadcast alley at Moscone West, not South or North or any of those other places. Yeah, I keep getting them all confused too, but they're all around here somewhere. But I don't know which way is West and North. I just go and see what's going on. I'm Doug White, and joining me for this interview is Stephan Jou.
Hello.
Yeah, hi. And Stephan is the Senior Director of Security Analytics. Cool title.
Thank you.
I like that title a lot. For OpenText. So, I mean, I like that title. I want a title like that.
It took a long time for me to assemble the right words in the right order and actually have a meaningful title. And that's what they came up with.
It is. Well, I'm glad you get to do that. I never get to do that. They're just like professor. It's like boring or something like that.
It's not bad, though.
Host. No, it's not that
think
bad.
I don't have professor in my title yet. So
I wanted maestro. Like in Europe, they have you'll see like maestro.
How about Duke? Duke's good too, right?
Oh, anytime. Any call me.
I could be Duke of Security Analytics.
I'll take Duke. I'll take Earl. I don't care. Like anything at all.
You sort of fiefdom.
So one of the things I was reading, what you were interested in talking about, was about redefining threat detection.
Sure.
And this was immediately something that was near and dear to me. And I'll tell you a story about it. Long ago, I mean, you'll see how long. I was working on a PDP 11.
Okay. Yes.
and
wait till you hear my follow up to your story. But please.
Okay,
keep going.
but I mean, it was
PDP 11.
I was told I should not. They didn't say secure it. I would just take care of it because there was no such thing as security then. I mean, that was not. But we were worried about it. We just didn't know we were worried about it. Yeah. And I ended up writing some scripts because I always wanted to capture things that people were doing. And one of the typing RCD, which is an old command for change directory on PDP 11.
Okay.
And it was a bad idea when I wrote the script because all of a sudden I came in and I've got 875 million entries in a folder, and I'm like, and in fact, that was when I learned that was where I learned awk because I had to parse this crap.
Okay.
And it was so difficult. And I know that that's something, that an area that you're working on is just sort of threat detection and how do we do this in a modern age?
Yeah, we were talking earlier, and both you and I have like a math background, and that's really where I'm coming from at the threat detection level. So
Okay.
I've been doing like analytics and AI in its various forms for about 20 years now.
Okay.
And after the first 10 years of solving some really interesting problems, I actually wanted to solve some of the most important problems in the world, and a lot of them ended up being in cyber. So there really was no UEBA at the time. There really was no sort of anomaly detection. There really was no, certainly no AI as we think of it now with LLMs and all that good stuff. But I had a thesis that I could sort of apply those same sort of classical statistical methods to be able to sort of find and baseline what normal behaviors look like in various formats, and then essentially quantify and detect abnormal behavior. And that's kind of the foundation of how we think about threat detection. I mean, there's other improvements that we've made on top of it, but that's really at the core of it.
That's really cool, actually. I like that idea. So I mean, that was really early AI stuff,
Yeah,
and then it's
quite
now
early.
evolved into like current AI kind of stuff.
Yes.
Because I think one of the sort of statements that would be here now is AI fighting AI to stop AI from attacking AI. So all that has started to create this kind of, how do you ever get to the point where you can assess and evaluate all these threats?
It's so funny. People assign a valence to AI, right? They talk about good AI versus bad AI, and for me, it's
all just AI.
It's all just
no
like
good AI,
yeah,
no bad
I
AI.
mean, it's really just math, right? Exactly.
Well,
So,
yeah. Everything's really just math.
I mean, fundamentally, it's all about, are you using this math or the tool for
Right.
good or for bad, right? And I view it this very same way. I actually don't lead with the AI or the math. I'm not like wielding a big AI hammer and trying to like find things to hit. I really am thinking about the use case. So what's the use case? Insider threat. Okay, why is it hard? Because you've got an authorized user running authorized applications on authorized machines, and they're still doing bad things, right? So standard access control does not work. So that leads you to a set of quantifiable methods and statistical anomaly detection and risk assessment, all of the, expected utility theory. So all the other techniques that have risen from that use case are the ones that I think that's the right approach to thinking about how using AI to combat AI.
And I think it's the original use case. I mean, because originally there were no outside users. It was all insiders.
Exactly.
And there were not even that many of them, but they were the biggest threats that we ever dealt with, because that was the people who knew the system. They had access to, like you said, they had access to the system. So is this all like about behavioral? I mean, is that where this goes? Is that we have to learn to say, I mean, because if you and I are sitting here and we see somebody doing something bad right over there,
Right.
we're able to perceive that that's a problem.
Yeah, ultimately, I agree with you. It is all about behavior, but I'm always interested in adding a qualifier, because I think when people hear the word behavior, especially when they think about the term user and entity behavior analytics, they focus on the user and they forget about the entity, right? So when we think about how useful it is to understand what normal behavior looks like, it's not just a human and how they normally behave. It's interesting to know what a process normally does and how it may or may not typically access the network. It's interesting to know how specific machines behave normally at different times of day, and what command line arguments are typically used by a sysadmin at this particular point in time, and what are not and might be used in some sort of privilege escalation activity. And certainly in the age of sort of more recent AI advances, I think it's going to become increasingly important to sort of understand what agents in your system are typically doing and what they shouldn't be doing.
Yeah, because I mean, I've been putting together like some stuff for a class I have to do in the fall called intrusion detection.
Right.
And, I'm adding agents to that are both good and bad agents. And I know they're really just math and they're just doing what they were told, but there's ones I have as good guys and ones I have that are bad guys, and I want them to be as sort of what I call polymorphic as possible, so that they're not just obvious bad people. They're doing different things, and maybe they even do some normal things, because I want them to kind of look like real.
Right.
Real insiders are doing things, and maybe they're working, and they decide, you know what, I could go look at this.
Yeah.
And then that becomes a big problem.
And I love that example too, because it's a good example of AI versus AI, right? So what you described, where you've got a malicious agent that is intentionally performing normal activities most of the time, and then every once in a while sneaking in that malicious behavior. I mean, that's an example of something like model poisoning, right? As you know, like trying to sort of tweak the baseline so that what is sort of malicious is sort of lost in the noise, or maybe you've got sort of adjustments that you've made to some of the underlying probability models.
Yep.
But really, there, like with any sort of mathematical method, there are ways to work around that. There are ways in which you can still see that. And
I mean, if I was writing malicious agents, they would definitely be like that. They would be statistical models that maybe use various distributions to randomize their behaviors, and normally they do very normal, very boring things. It's just that one behavior that I hope you no longer notice, because you're used to seeing that behavior. You see it, and all of a sudden that's when it goes and does what I want it to do. And
again, we're talking about this like it's something that only an AI could do, but if you think about it, there's no real difference between that behavior and a sort of really smart adversary who's already broken into the network, or maybe they're already an insider and they're doing a low and slow, right?
And they don't even have to be really smart.
Yeah,
I mean, this could literally be one of these people back on the PDP-11 who was working on their homework in engineering 1010, and then they just decide, I'm going to see what's over here. Right. And they just deviate. And that was what I was learning. I didn't know what I was doing, so I was just trying to figure things out. And by watching those behaviors and going, I started developing a list of users that I was worried about.
Right.
And it was literally about profiling people into this sort of possible potential problems. Probably not.
Right.
And because some people never deviated from the instructions they got, and some people immediately deviated. But there's really scary ones. The bad ones I knew. The really scary ones were in the middle.
That's
well, what do you think like the current biggest worries are from all this?
I'm going to pick on two specific techniques that at least we're seeing emerge. So the one is sort of AI-powered deepfakes and phishing. Right, obviously, with LLMs being so readily available, it's more economically feasible right now to sort of really generate en masse some really good phishing emails without any of the traditional tells. The second one that I'm actually seeing is a really dramatic increase in living off the land techniques. So taking advantage, whether they're an intentional insider or maybe they're an outsider that broke in and did an account takeover.
Bought access.
Yeah, exactly. So they're using living off the land to essentially blur the line between sort of expected behaviors and malicious behaviors. I mean, we still see them because they're essentially doing, they're accessing PSExec in ways that really they shouldn't be. Right?
Yeah.
WMI stuff that shouldn't be.
But that's subtle.
Happening.
I mean, that's living off the land stuff. Because I mean, again, that was always when I was doing pen tests and things like that, that was always, and that's what I try to talk to students about, is this, like I said, the bad person walks in with a shotgun.
Right.
Bad person, problem. Good person sitting at their desk working. But it's those people that you don't know what their behavior is that are very, very worrisome to everyone. And would be my style.
Right.
I don't want to jump in and deface your website and go, you're an idiot. I want to come in and create a background job that looks important that you don't notice, and it sits there for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks, and maybe just every now and then it does something.
Yeah. So it's interesting. Our hit rate is actually pretty good. I think our sort of inventory of algorithms that detect those types of threats, no matter how sort of subtle they try to be, I think we're over 80% detection of all sort of red team attacks, which is, I'm pretty proud of that. And the thing that makes it so hard is kind of exactly what you described. The limitations of a truly malicious insider attack is really only limited by the sort of motivation and imagination of the human, right? Humans are incredibly creative, right?
Yeah.
Like, I remember watching a guy sort of on the inside steal source code by sort of paging through the source code one screen at a time, taking screenshots, and then mailing those screenshots into like 3 different Gmail accounts. Obviously, he's trying to subvert, any sort of simple DLP rule-based systems or whitelist or things like that.
Is this the essence of this core threat detection and response product that you have?
Absolutely.
I mean, that's what this is doing. So this is AI looking at behavior. I know you don't want to say behaviors, but AI that's assessing this environment, looking for these insider threats.
Exactly.
Because, I think these are the biggest threats that we have, and they worry me a lot because I always worried about those people.
Yeah, we are actually well known for our insider threat detection.
Right. Yeah.
I would humbly claim that we're among the best in the industry.
Yeah, I mean, I know the name, so I mean, it's like immediate with that. So, obviously this is going to escalate. I mean, this is sort of where this goes because, like you said, LLMs are now available to, on my phone. They're available to me. I can buy time on them if I don't even want to try to run the horsepower locally to train them. I can buy one that's either pre-trained.
And they're so small now. You can run it on your notebook if you want.
Well, yeah. Once you train it up, you can just pull it down and run it on a notebook computer. And so I can sit here in the lobby and run an LLM that's doing this. I mean, how are we going to shift our defensive postures from this? Because the story I always tell about this is from William Gibson. Another Canadian, from 1987, where he's talking about AIs attacking AIs and people hiring AIs to defend against other AIs and all these kind of things. How do we need to be shifting our defensive posture now? I mean, does this just need to literally be shifting into the AI realm so that it becomes beyond poor old me sitting there at the PDP 11?
Right.
Because I'm never going to keep up.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like you, I spend a lot of my time just doing education. I'm always torn, right? As big of a fan I am of AI, like we discussed earlier, I've been doing this for decades now at this point. I'm also sometimes distressed by how much magic people ascribe to AI, right? They think it's a magical tool that can do anything. So a lot of it is just being aware that there are these really good techniques that are now available to you, and they can be used for good, not just for bad. There's a lot of buzz around there, and so sometimes people do think it's magic, but it's not. I like saying AI is magical, but it's not magic, right?
No, it's not.
So, and really, there's really nothing an AI can't do that a really smart human couldn't do on your behalf. You just don't have enough of them.
Right.
And they need to sleep, they need coffee, they need
Yeah.
to eat. Whereas a good chunk of math could be working 24/7 sort of on you, right? So a lot of it for me is around sort of automation, scalability, cost effectiveness of sort of taking what you would need and otherwise, an infinite number of really smart threat hunters, for example, to be able to do, and just automate that in a way that you can deploy it on your side, on the defensive side at scale.
And so the other part of this problem was even way back then was just being overwhelmed.
Yeah.
As a system admin or whatever, when I set those rules up, and I didn't even know what I was doing.
Right.
I didn't know that later there would be snorts and all these kind of rules, these very static things.
Right.
But I was what I was doing. I'm looking for things. I'm triggering signatures, and I'm generating, and I'm generating a stack of green bar this high every day that I would, somehow need to go through.
Right.
And I think a lot of modern shops face that with their analysts just going, I'm overwhelmed. I've got so much stuff I'm supposed to approve or deny or whatever. So how does this sort of facilitate that? Is it just reducing that off the table and saying, okay,
I mean, what a great question. So we were very mindful of alert. I mean, alert fatigue is real. We didn't want to add to the noise. So when we took the approach of sort of how do we mathematically architect a solution that will actually just not add to the list of alerts that you're already overwhelmed by, that's not what we do. What we're doing is we're taking the alerts that you already have and we're just telling you where to look. Hey, look at this guy, right? Look at that guy. And the way we do that is by sort of looking at various data streams, including the set of alerts that you've already got, including the endpoint type data, identity data, like whatever data you have. We're not asking you to deploy another agent. Right. We're just analyzing the data that you've already got and finding the most anomalous, but not randomly generically anomalous.
No.
It's always in the context of a security use case. It's always in the context of a known sort of MITRE attack and technique. And we're just saying, okay, out of the 100 people that you might have in your organization, or 1,000 people, or 10,000 people, here's your leaderboard of risk.
Right.
Look at this machine at this time, and hopefully
that's what I wanted.
Yeah, we're just trying to save you time.
Back in 1981, that's what I wanted. I was like, I wish I had something like that. I guess I should have built it, and I would have been ahead of you in the game, but unfortunately, I'm too lazy.
Competitors, Doug. I don't know about that.
It might have been fun, though.
True.
Well, to find out more about all this, you can go to all of our RSAC 2025 coverage. You can go to securityweekly.com/RSAC, or you can go to securityweekly.com/open text RSAC. It's hard to say sometimes, but that will get you to a landing page about that. Thank you so much, Stephan Jou. That was really enjoyable.
Absolute pleasure.
I wish we had like another 2 hours that we could talk about this, but the rest of you, stick around. We got more interviews. We got live coverage, not quite round the clock, but I'm trying to get that because the crew just keeps saying, man, like we could use more work to do. So stick around and we'll see you next time.